The Urban Reaper. Gotham Heights, a sprawling metropolis renowned for its vibrant nightlife and towering skyscrapers, was a city of contrasts. Beneath its glittering facade of wealth and progress lay a dark underbelly of crime and corruption. The city's heartbeat was a cacophony of sirens, honking horns, and the whispers of its inhabitants. Recently, those whispers had taken on a new, sinister tone. People were disappearing, their bodies found days later, mutilated beyond recognition. The media dubbed the killer the Urban Reaper, a name that struck fear into the hearts of the city's residents. The police were baffled, unable to find a single clue that led to the perpetrator. The Reaper moved through the city like a phantom, leaving behind a trail of terror and blood. Chapter 1: The First Victim. Jessica Turner was a young, ambitious lawyer with a promising career ahead of her. One evening, after a long day at the office, she decided to walk home, taking a shortcut through an alley she had used countless times before. It was a decision she would never live to regret. Her body was found the next morning, discarded like trash in a dumpster. The scene was horrific. Her throat had been slit, and a strange symbol was carved into her chest. The police were called, and Detective Jack Hayes, a seasoned investigator with a knack for solving the city's most difficult cases, was assigned to lead the investigation. Hayes surveyed the crime scene with a practiced eye, taking in every detail. The symbol on Jessica's chest was unfamiliar to him, but it seemed deliberate, like a calling card. He knew that this was no ordinary murder. It was the work of someone who enjoyed inflicting pain and terror. Chapter 2: The investigation begins. The police scrambled to find leads, questioning Jessica's colleagues, friends, and family. No one could provide any useful information. Jessica had no known enemies, and her life seemed to be in perfect order. The only clue they had was the symbol carved into her chest, which forensic experts identified as a variation of an ancient rune associated with death and chaos. Hayes dove into the city's archives, looking for any similar cases. To his surprise, he found several unsolved murders dating back over a decade, all bearing the same symbol. The victims were from different walks of life, with no apparent connection to each other. The Reaper, it seemed, had been at work for much longer than anyone had realized. Chapter 3: The Pattern. Hayes, now obsessed with catching the Reaper, began to see a pattern in the killings. Each murder occurred in a different part of the city, following a twisted logic that only the killer understood. The victims were chosen seemingly at random, but the method of their deaths was always the same: a slit throat and the symbol carved into their chest. Hayes brought in a criminal profiler, Dr. Eleanor Walsh, to help him understand the Reaper's mind. Walsh, a brilliant but reclusive psychologist, had spent years studying serial killers and their motives. She agreed to assist Hayes, intrigued by the complexity of the case. The Reaper is methodical, highly intelligent, and deeply disturbed, Walsh explained. He sees himself as an artist, and his murders are his masterpieces. The symbol is his signature, a way of marking his territory and instilling fear. Chapter 4: The Breakthrough. One night, while poring over old case files, Hayes received a call from a terrified witness. A homeless man named Charlie had seen something the night Jessica Turner was killed. He described a tall, shadowy figure moving with eerie precision, disappearing into the darkness after the deed was done. Charlie led Hayes to a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where he claimed to have seen the figure disappear. Hayes, armed with a flashlight and a sense of determination, entered the warehouse alone. The place was a labyrinth of rusted machinery and decaying walls, the air thick with the smell of neglect. As he ventured deeper, Hayes stumbled upon a hidden room. Inside, he found a disturbing collection of photographs and newspaper clippings, each one documenting the Reaper's killings. The walls were covered in the same symbol carved into the victims' chests, painted in a mix of red and black. It was a shrine to the Reaper's twisted legacy. In the center of the room stood a makeshift altar, upon which lay a journal filled with the Reaper's thoughts and plans. Hayes knew he had found something crucial, but as he reached for the journal, he heard a noise behind him. Chapter 5: The Confrontation. Hayes turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, cloaked in shadows. The Reaper, his face hidden behind a grotesque mask, stepped forward, a knife glinting in his hand. "You've come far, detective," he said, his voice a chilling whisper. "But this is where your journey ends." Hayes, his heart pounding, reached for his gun, but the Reaper was faster. They struggled, the confined space making it difficult to move. The Reaper slashed wildly, his blade grazing Hayes' arm. Hayes fought back with everything he had, driven by a primal need to survive. In a desperate move, Hayes managed to knock the knife from the Reaper's hand and tackle him to the ground. The Reaper laughed, a sound that sent shivers down Hayes' spine. "You think you've won, but you don't understand. The city belongs to me. I am its dark guardian." Chapter 6, The Hunt continues. Hayes, bloodied but victorious, unmasked the Reaper to reveal a face he had never seen before. The man was a stranger, an enigma with no apparent ties to the city. He was arrested and taken into custody, but his capture did little to ease the city's fear. Under interrogation, the Reaper remained silent, his eyes cold and unyielding. Dr. Walsh attempted to break through his defenses, but he was a master of manipulation, revealing nothing of his motives or plans. The journal provided some insight into his twisted mind, but it was clear that he had been careful not to leave any incriminating evidence. Hayes knew that the Reaper had followers, acolytes who shared his dark vision. The symbol was a mark of their allegiance, and as long as they existed, the city would never be truly safe. The hunt was far from over. Epilogue, The Legacy. Gotham Heights slowly began to recover from the Reaper's reign of terror, but the scars remained. The city had changed, its people more vigilant and wary of the darkness that lurked in the shadows. Hayes and Walsh continued their work, determined to root out the Reaper's followers and bring them to justice. The Reaper's cell remained a place of silence and shadows, his eyes always watching, always waiting. He knew that his legacy would endure, that the fear he had sown would never fully dissipate. And in the quiet corners of the city, in the places where the light never reached, the symbol of the Reaper continued to appear, a reminder that the darkness was always there, just beneath the surface. The Urban Reaper's story was far from over. It had merely begun a new chapter, one that would haunt Gotham Heights for years to come. Chapter 7, The New Threat. Months passed, and the city began to heal, but Detective Jack Hayes remained vigilant. Despite the Reaper's incarceration, Hayes knew that the cult-like followers were still out there. A chilling thought haunted him: the Reaper's arrest might have only emboldened his disciples. One rainy night, Hayes received a call from Dr. Eleanor Walsh. She had found a disturbing pattern in recent petty crimes and vandalism across the city. The same symbol used by the Reaper was being spray-painted on walls and sidewalks, often accompanied by cryptic messages. "It's like they're communicating," Walsh said, her voice tense. "They're organizing, and they're trying to send us a message." Chapter 8, The Copycat. Hayes and Walsh intensified their surveillance, focusing on known haunts and hangouts of the city's underground. The graffiti led them to an abandoned subway station, a dark and eerie place that had been out of use for years. Inside the station, they found more symbols and a makeshift camp. It was clear that someone had been living there recently. Among the debris, they discovered a series of photographs pinned to the wall, all depicting potential new victims. The Reaper's cult was preparing for another strike. Late one night, they finally caught a break. A young woman, barely out of her teens, was spotted tagging one of the symbols on a derelict building. Hayes and his team apprehended her, and under intense interrogation, she revealed the existence of a new leader within the cult, someone who had taken up the mantle of the Reaper. "He calls himself the Shadow," she said, her voice trembling. "He believes he's the true heir to the Reaper's legacy." Chapter 9, The Shadow's Plan. Hayes and Walsh knew they had to move quickly. The Shadow was elusive, but the young woman's information led them to a network of abandoned buildings in the industrial district. These buildings, connected by underground tunnels, were the perfect hiding places for the cult. Hayes and his team raided the buildings, facing fierce resistance from the cult members. The encounters were brutal, and the officers discovered just how fanatical the Reaper's followers were. They were willing to die for their cause. In one of the buildings, Hayes found a detailed map of the city, marked with dates and locations. It was a plan for a series of coordinated attacks meant to spread terror and chaos. The dates were fast approaching, and they realized they were in a race against time. Chapter 10: The Final Confrontation. The Shadows' attacks began as planned, with a wave of fear sweeping through Gotham Heights. Buildings were set on fire, random assaults occurred, and the city's residents were thrown into a state of panic. Hayes and his team managed to prevent some of the attacks, but they knew the real threat lay in the final target, a major public event that would draw thousands of people. On the night of the event, Hayes and Walsh led a large contingent of police and undercover agents to the location. The atmosphere was tense, the crowd unaware of the danger lurking in their midst. As the night progressed, Hayes' team spotted several suspicious individuals moving through the crowd, all wearing the symbol of the Reaper. Hayes followed one of them, leading him to a secluded area behind the stage. There, he came face to face with the Shadow, a gaunt man with a chilling presence, his eyes burning with fanatical zeal. "This ends tonight," Hayes said, his voice steady but firm. The Shadow smiled, a cruel twist of his lips. "You're too late, Detective. The Reaper's legacy will never die." A brutal fight ensued, and Hayes found himself pushed to his limits. The Shadow was as skilled and ruthless as his predecessor. The fight raged on, each combatant landing blows that could have been fatal. In a desperate move, Hayes managed to disarm the Shadow and incapacitate him, but not without sustaining serious injuries himself. Epilogue: The Aftermath. With the Shadow's capture, the immediate threat was neutralized, but the damage had been done. The city had been shaken to its core, and the scars of the Reaper's reign would take a long time to heal. The followers were rounded up and arrested, their network dismantled, but Hayes knew that the ideology they followed could resurface at any time. Dr. Walsh continued to study the Reaper and his followers, hoping to understand and prevent such horrors in the future. Hayes, recovering from his injuries, was hailed as a hero, but he remained haunted by the events. He knew that darkness could never be fully eradicated, only kept at bay. The city of Gotham Heights, resilient and strong, began to rebuild. Its residents grew more vigilant, aware that while the immediate threat had passed, the Shadows always lingered, waiting for the right moment to strike again. In the quiet corners of the city, where light barely touched, the symbol of the Reaper remained etched into the minds of those who had witnessed the terror. And though the Reaper and the Shadow were gone, their legacy would serve as a grim reminder that evil often lurked just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge from the darkness.
Don't forget to subscribe.